Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, testing the audio. Board of Public Works. Nothing. Wait. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
hours. How come they close the cafeteria early? Why'd they close the cafeteria early?
Test, test, 1, 2, 3, 4, test, 1, 2. Are you getting it? Test, test, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
One, two, three, four, five. 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Hello, hello. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to test.
Nothing works in City Hall. Nothing works. Nothing works in City Hall. Nothing works.
This is the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar, Chair of the committee. We've been joined by Vice Chair Marquise Harris-Dawson and Councilmember Gilbert Cedillo. We will start off with item number 11, report from the Director of Planning. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Huizar, members of the committee. Vince Bertoni, Director of City Planning. The only thing I want to report on today is last week, there was an award ceremony for the Los Angeles chapter of the American Planning Association, and the City of LA received 6 awards. So we're very proud of that. One of them was for the Plan Healthy Los Angeles, which was for a Comprehensive Planning Award, which is a Healthy Cities element of the general plan. Another was for our Mobility Plan 2035, which won the Transportation Planning Award. Third was Historic Places LA for the innovative use of technology, and that's a web system. That's a web application for our historic resources. The fourth was Survey LA's Latino Los Angeles Historic Context Statement, which won the Social Change and Diversity Award, and that is one of the first, if not the first, Latino context statement within a major city in the United States. So we're very proud of that. We also won for the Historic Broadway Sign District for best planning practices, and Councilmember Huizar was well represented at the meeting by his staff. And then the last but not least is a backyard beekeeping ordinance for grassroots initiative. So the city did very well, and did very well in a variety of areas, and it really showed how we're looking at our planning through many different lenses, and we're really proud of that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Harris-Dawson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our Director of Planning for such a hopeful report. A couple things I want to put on your plate for your upcoming reports, perhaps not the next one, maybe the one after that, is, as you know, South Los Angeles just awarded a Promise Zone grant, and we know that some of the, what I would call bricks and mortar departments of the federal government are not necessarily involved. But I would love for the planning department to take a look at that and see what the opportunities there are, particularly as they exist along transit lines, because the South LA Promise Zone is really organized around rail, the new rail investment. And then if we could get some updates on a periodic basis on the progress of the specific plans, that every neighborhood council meeting or block club meeting I get asked, when is this going to be done? How far along are we? What do we need to do to push it? So if we can get a report on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one public speaker, Herman.
Mr. Chair, you will address me as Mr. Herman. I deserve that respect. I'd like to thank everyone for Healthy LA and more so for mobility plans, because we the people do not yield our sovereignty to this body or any body in the city of Los Angeles when it comes to respecting our health and our mobility. Woltz versus Los Angeles, Barden versus Sacramento, and a reminder that the DEA office will protect our civil rights under 121.31 and respectably more so 121.32 for the record, Mr. Attorney. As a reminder, we the public are the body of how this machine functions. Me and Mr. B back here know how the machine works, as Mr. Spindler Wayne from Encino pointed out on his public comment card.
Thank you. We will receive an file number 11. Moving on to item number 8, we will continue the item. Item number 9, we will also continue. And we will approve on consent item number 10 unless there's a speaker's card. Okay, there's no speaker's card. So item 10, consent, 9 and 8 continue. Thank you very much. Any objection to those items? Seeing none, so ordered. Item number 1, call that to order, please.
Councilman, member of the public indicates that he submitted cards on some of the items that you continued.
Okay, according to what I have here, there are no speaker's card on number 10. The other items have been continued, so we have no need to hear any public comment on that today. Okay. Item number 1.
Item 1, Councilman, this is a reappointment submitted by the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Carolyn Cho to the City Planning Commission.
Thank you, and thank you for agreeing to continue service on the City Planning Commission. I want to thank you for the time and effort you've put into this, and your expertise in real estate certainly helps. So we want to thank you, and you're active in a number of other issues, including organization I used to be a board member of a long time ago, the Asian Pacific Women's Center. So, well, welcome. And anything you'd like to share with the committee?
Sure. Thank you, council members. It has been a wonderful journey for me for the last 2 years to work with you and the staff on some great projects. Staff has been extremely supportive, and I'm very thankful for the support I've received from our planning director, Vince, as well as our deputy director. The City of Los Angeles is going through tremendous change, and it is an understatement to say that it's been a very exciting time for me to serve on the commission. I rely heavily on staff and each of the council members and your staff to understand the bigger perspective to each project that comes before us. I understand that decisions cannot be made in a vacuum. I continue to look forward to open communication with you and working more closely with each of you. So thank you for your faith in me as commissioner, and I look forward to serving the next term as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for the reappointment of Ms. Cho? Well, thanks again, and we look forward to continue to work with you. We're moving a lot of items through CPC, and I know you guys are very busy.
We're very busy.
So, we appreciate it.
So thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
With no objections, so ordered. We'll hear this item in full council. Thank you. Item number 2.
Item 2, Councilman, this is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Donna Choi to the East LA APC.
Thank you, and welcome, Ms. Choi, and thank you for your willingness to continue to serve on this commission, another busy commission as well. And we appreciate that. And so thank you, and anything you'd like to share with the committee and or observations as in your role as a commissioner on the APC?
Well, first of all, it is a real honor to serve, and especially to serve in the great 14th Council District, which includes my home, Eagle Rock, so that's awesome. And we've seen a lot of change going on there. I'm really happy to be part of it, and I'm glad to say I've twice been unanimously voted in as Vice President of the Commission, and I ask for your support so I can continue to serve.
Great, thank you very much, and we've certainly appreciated your role on the commission from someone who understands the importance of improving the quality of life for individuals from the perspective of improving land use issues and policies. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you these 2 years, right?
Yeah.
2 years. So any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move this item with approval and send it to full council with no objection.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, oh yes, we have an item number 2. We have a card. Herman?
Yes, Ms. Donna, just as a reminder, because you represent, at this point, East Los Angeles area planning, a history of unpowerlessness in our community is a reminder that the DA's lawsuits equal injunctive mandatory relief, or as I call it, declaratory relief, to avoid action taken on behalf of the public in violation of any action you do that hinders and harms the public. So as a reminder, Donna, I looked through the internet. You have no porn, as reported by the news media lately, with elected officials and police and firemen being involved in internet porn with young children, Mr. Bonin. But once again, Ms. Wagner of the ACLU will represent me in my case of the Brown Act violations that you've created. Stop hindering my ability to perform the task that I come here for, which is to advocate on behalf of the public's interest, because I'm not afraid to stand up to the local machine that you are. Stop violating my rights under 54-950, the Brown Act, and I have every right to be here under the Brown Act, 54-954.3.c, to criticize you to the most offensive, inflammatory expression possible.
Thank you. So we'll approve this item as mentioned and send it to full council without objection. Item number 3.
Item 3, Councilman, this is a motion by Council Members Wesson, Bonin, and Blumenfield and Rio. It's instructing Building and Safety to immediately halt and suspend the processing of liens to the City Council pending further action. And the motion also requests a report from the Department of Building and Safety.
Welcome. Is staff to hear on this item? Well, this is actually it's a motion we'll refer to staff.
Right, unless you want to hear from staff, one
Yeah.
of the deputy directors of Building and Safety is here.
Okay, staff here. We hope to refer this to staff and hear back in 60 days. While I think it is appropriate for us to review the lien processes in the city and how do we alleviate the number that reach the council level and other issues raised in the motion. This motion does ask for a suspension of processing liens, which I don't think it would be in the best interest of the city or anyone to do that right now. So we'll refer to staff, and if you could just come back to us and respond to the issues raised in the motion with respect to developing a better process, a review and recommendations of developing better processes on with respect to liens. Is that appropriate? Okay. Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. We have one public comment card. Herman?
Well, you've heard in the past John Walsh, Wayne Spindler, and for the record, Armando Herman, have protected the rights of individuals who are basically denied due process. Is it unconstitutional to defend your right regarding the so-called predatory liens? If you have a lien on your property, anyone or a neighbor, please come to City Hall and put public testimony. Don't allow the Department of Building and Safety and Charles, the African American, to persuade you not to speak, because it gives you extra time for due process. Thank you, Cedillo, for protecting our rights when it comes to due process. You are a respectful, honorable senator, and with all due respect, thank you for protecting our rights under the Brown Act.
We'll refer this item to staff and hear back in 60 days. Thank you. Item number 4.
Item 4, Councilman, this is a report from the Planning Commission. It involves a revision to the land use for the property in Atwater, and it also involves a zone change from open space to commercial manufacturing.
Thank you. And we continued this item from the last plum meeting because there were some questions as to whether or what are we doing rezoning this item from open space to, what's it being rezoned to?
Commercial manufacturing.
Commercial manufacturing. And as I understand it, and it was explained to me, when the city initiated a rezoning of this area, it mistakenly rezoned this parcel when it was not supposed to be rezoned. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And no one caught it back then.
Correct. It was a different system. Things are automated in a way that they were not 20 years ago.
All right, and what year was this?
This was during the 2004 community plan update.
Okay. And so now it's been brought back to our attention that we need to rezone it to the commercial manufacturing, which is the use that exists there currently, and also to make it consistent with other planning tools that we have in the area,
and to make it consistent with the remainder of the commercial manufacturing properties that exist within the vicinity.
Okay. So my question remains, do we have any future plans to use this area as open space and for the purposes and in relation to the river or more access to the river, do we have any future plans for open space use of this area?
Craig Weber, City Planning staff. There are no future plans that I'm aware of. So the Department of Rec and Parks does not have a plan for this site. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, who operates the park facility immediately next door to the subject site, does not have any plans for this site. No other public agency has plans to acquire, build, or operate a park at this site that I'm aware of.
And the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy has not expressed an interest in this property?
Not that I'm aware of. We've inquired, and they indicated that they didn't have any interest at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions for staff at this time before I go to public comment? Okay. Seeing none, let me go to public comment. Thank you. Did you want to share anything with us before we go on, or is that just...
Thank you for the invitation. I have something of a narrative trying to explain the course of events that have brought us here. I can offer that again for the record if it's useful, or we can move forward with the hearing.
Briefly, yes.
Okay. So, one, just as a helpful reference, I distributed this map. The subject property that we're looking at is outlined in dark blue. The swath of property along the river was zoned initially industrial and with a heavy manufacturing M2 zone for several decades. In the 2004 community plan update, all of the industrial properties were converted to commercial manufacturing to allow kind of a softer mix of uses with an infusion of some residential. There were queue conditions that really tailored that to the river environment. But a handful of sites that were in the process of being acquired by the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy were changed instead from M2 to open space. With this particular site, the boundary was simply drawn too large. Again, I want to reiterate for the record, we held a public hearing back in November of 2015. We circulated a negative declaration from January to the beginning of February. The City Planning Commission weighed in on the matter in March of 2016.
Okay, great, thank you. Elizabeth Camacho, Herman, and Doug Haynes.
Good afternoon, council members. Elizabeth Camacho on behalf of the property owner. We support the correction action. We appreciate all of staff's work on this matter. As has been explained in the staff report and in previous comments, the current open space general plan designation and zoning was imposed in error and is improper. This property has always been privately owned. It is part of a larger site that has been and is in active industrial use under single ownership and operated as one industrial site for decades. As a result of the error in 2004 in connection with the community plan update, this property, the larger property, was improperly split zoned, with one portion being zoned as CM and the remainder as open space. And that error has interfered with the property owner's ability to effectively manage, operate, and finance this property. There is no public agency who has ever made any effort to acquire this property, and in the absence of such an acquisition, the continued maintenance of the open space general plan and zoning designation is improper and must be corrected. So we ask for your support for this correction action, and we thank you for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Herman?
Well, so late into a project, right? CD 13, Mitchell Farrell. What has he got to do with this? Obviously, nothing. When there's an adverse change in zones, you see how it impacts your community? See how it changes the aspect of what's really happening here at City Hall? When the so-called element becomes unbalanced and people begin to realize, are we being douched by the douchebags? Are we? So if you stand up for what you had no community impact statement for, then yes, they're going to do whatever the hell they want. But there are people who live in the communities. Like I live by Exide, but now I'm homeless. Thanks to some who sit here today, Mr. Chair. But I won't lollygag on my time. I give you back the remaining 3 seconds.
Doug Haynes, down your right.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Haynes. I've spoken on this matter for the past year, and I think it's really important to correct statements that have been made Whether or not it was a mistake is irrelevant to the fact that the current owner purchased the property after the zoning was changed to open space. So he purchased the property fully aware of the restrictions on that property at that time and his inability to use it for any purpose he wished. The proper procedure to follow through now would be to have a variance for non-conforming use to allow him to continue to use the existing commercial buildings. The site contains a fire door manufacturing division, and because of that, this will probably be phased out in the near future. Commercial manufacturing is one of the least restrictive zonings in the city of LA. Open space is the most restrictive. Potentially he could do anything he wants then with the site. There's no public benefit to this. It would be a tragedy to lose this as a future dedication. Whether or not someone currently wishes to purchase it, it's to the city's benefit to maintain this open space for this Hispanic community. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Wright, Robert Leyland.
Okay, thanks. That's good. Good afternoon, Daniel Wright on behalf of Georgia Abramson and the Citizens for Open Space. The city staff proposes to amend the Silver Lake Community Plan land use designation from open space to commercial manufacturing. This amendment is based upon an erroneous claim by the city planning staff that the comprehensive planning of the Silver Lake Community Plan for this lot was an error. But the evidence submitted by the community shows otherwise, and the record is clear on that. Thus, since the record shows no error, this is essentially a request for an unlawful initiation of a general plan amendment by the mayor's office initially, and an attempt to use a parcel-based general plan amendment to rezone the lot for an individual desire of the real estate developer. In 1969, the voters of Los Angeles overhauled the city's planning provisions in the charter by putting a specific limit on the city's authority that says that geographical area proposed must possess significant social, economic, or physical identity. One parcel does not qualify for that, and therefore you lack the authority to process this either under error or under the charter. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Leyland, Mickey Jackson.
My name is Robert Leyland, a longtime resident of Elysian Valley. I am speaking for myself only, but I am a member of the board of the Elysian Valley Riverside Neighborhood Council and co-chair of its Environment Land Use Committee. We have been excluded from the process. We should be able to participate and play the role as an advisory agency as the charter calls for. The site was designated as open space as part of a grand vision when grand vision was possible. Now that vision is increasingly corrupted. Mountain Recreation and Conservation Authority staff recommended that the Los Angeles River as an urban wildlife refuge. The site was added to the corridor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mickey Jackson, George Abrams.
Hello, everyone. Aren't we glad it's not quite as hot as it was yesterday? I'm here from the Coalition to Preserve LA, and we're the folks who are in the process of putting an initiative to make these kinds of spot zoning and zoning changes to make it to reinforce the fact that they are not allowed in the charter. We're not against all development by all means, but we are against things like this. The most rare thing we have in this city is open space, and on what to me just seems like, I don't know, my grandma would have called it flim-flam, to say, oh, that was a mistake. Where's the evidence it was a mistake? Was everything a mistake? How do we know it's a mistake? We don't know. So I don't think we should do this. I think it's a very bad idea.
Thank you. Jennifer. George Abrams, then Jennifer. Thanks.
George Abrahams. There's nothing more obscene in CEQA than a negative declaration for a general plan amendment. A GPA is supposed to be general, according to Section 55A of the city charter, to involve areas of significant social, economic, or physical identity. A negative declaration, according to CEQA guidelines, Section 15063B2, is prepared only if there is no substantial evidence that the project or any aspect may cause a significant effect on the environment. If a GPA does not have a significant effect on the environment, then the area is too small to have significant social, economic, or physical identity. And if an area has significant social, economic, or physical identity, then a GPA may cause a significant effect on the environment, and a negative declaration couldn't possibly be the right CEQA determination, and puts the lie to the many spot GPA changes that the planning department puts before the city council. The GPA cannot be both significant and non-significant at the same time. This is a 1 = 0 logic error.
Thank you. Jennifer Daines. All right. Annie Gagan.
Hi, Jennifer Dynas. Yes. I'm a stakeholder in CD1, but I'm also a stakeholder in CD13 because my child goes to school down here by the river. And I do just want to tell you that you've heard a lot about how consistent CM is for this parcel. I'd also like to tell you how consistent open space is. Open space, this is next to Marsh Park, and it abuts the river. I don't know what could be more consistent with open space zoning than that. Converting it to commercial manufacturing is just, yes, it does match some of the other parcels nearby, but the commercial manufacturing zone was something that happened during the 2004 community plan update when they did all the changes from M2 to CM. And this parcel, this 1.3 acre parcel, was offered as a mitigation measure to the upzoning of all the surrounding parcels. You'll see that if you look at the 2003 MND. And I'd also like to highlight that 2003 MND was vetted for 3 years. And not only that, but there was a map attached to that showing this zone change that was distributed to 33,000 people.
Thank you. Annie Gagan.
Gentlemen, I'm opposed to a zone change. I'm opposed to proposed general plan amendment revising the existing land use designation from open space to commercial manufacturing. I think we all feel very much that the river belongs to everyone, and following what's been going on with the river, it just begs the question, is there anything that this city feels is worth preserving? This would be criminal. We need open space. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. And planning staff, anything else you'd like to add?
Hello, Craig Weber, City Planning staff. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. Perhaps just a couple of points to offer into the record. First, it is true that the CM zone itself is quite permissive. However, what is proposed here is a qualified CM zone, or a Q with Q conditions. So a lot of thinking has gone into the right balance of uses in this Elysian Valley River adjacent area. The Q conditions offer a number of use restrictions and a number of development standards intended to cater new development to be really tailored to the river environment. So there are setbacks, there are lot coverage requirements, there are a number of uses that are prohibited. I can expand on that if you like. But that would apply to this site as it does to existing sites today. Second, I want to talk a little bit about the error. So during this process and at our City Planning Commission meeting and in the exhibits in that report, there were a couple of things that were viewed in that meeting. So number one was a hand-drawn map from staff with their meetings with the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy during the development of the community plan. So staff sat down with the Conservancy, identified what are the sites that you're intending to acquire to convert to parks. Those were outlined. Those notes miraculously have been retained and were an exhibit in the staff report. And they showed the correct boundaries. The subsequent drawing of boundaries for the zone change ordinance itself were what were overdrawn. And so you can see there's the layering of those two things next to each other. Not to get too into the weeds, also in the ordinance, the change matrix ordinance as part of the community plan update, there's a table that shows what are we converting zones to, and in that table is a field for what is the reasoning for the zone change. So for the properties that were being converted to open space, The reasoning was that properties were acquired by public agencies for the construction of a park. That's true for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy's properties. That is not true, has never been true for the subject property. So that alone pinpoints what the error was. We were intending to change the zone and the plan designation for public land where there was a plan to actually build parks. I can elaborate or answer any questions that you might have.
Just to be clear on this map here, which parcel is it again?
So it has a dark blue boundary around it, kind of in the foreground. So you'll see there's this ribbon of blue that ends somewhat abruptly. The large field of green adjacent to the river is the the Marsh Park site. And then there's this triangular site, the very tip of which is under the same ownership and is properly zoned for commercial manufacturing. And then there's the polygon adjacent to that that is incorrectly zoned open space.
So it's those three parcels. It's not just the one.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And what is that boundary there, that line there that goes there? This one here.
I can't speak to the genesis of that boundary. There have been a number of subdivisions and re-subdivisions subsequent to the Army Corps of Engineers channelizing the river and creating new land. I'm not really sure where that line comes from.
And so there's always been a commercial operation there. And
Since the 1940s.
And there's an existing commercial operator there.
Correct.
The business has been there since even after it was mistakenly rezoned?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
To be clear, Mr. Weber, it's the entire site is developed, correct?
Correct. The entirety of the site.
Entirety site, majority is buildings, and the balance of it is all hardscape. So it's all either buildings or hardscape and parking.
Okay.
And there are statements to that effect in the findings.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Cedillo.
It seems like we're only conforming to the reality that exists and has been existing since the 1940s. As you indicated, so I would move that we approve the item.
Okay, it's been moved, and we'll second that to move the item to adopt the motion with the changes to the associate resolution language as submitted by the Planning Department in regards to the height districts identified therein. So, any objections? No objections. Seeing that, so ordered. Thank you. Next item.
The next item, Councilman, is an appeal by Doug Turnquist from the determination of the Central APC relative to the approval of a vesting tract map for 5 single-family dwellings.
Hi, my name is Amanda Briones, the staff planner for this case. This is Jose Carlos, the deputy advisor agency who oversaw this case. The appeal case before you is a vesting tentative tract map for a small lot subdivision to create 5 lots for the development of 5 single-family dwellings, 1 dwelling unit on each lot. The project site is approximately 16,182 square feet in the RD 1.5-1XL zone. The project requires demolition of the existing structure on site. There were 2 public hearings. The first hearing was continued, and the second hearing considered a reduced project in scope. The deputy advisor agency approved the subdivision request based on the submitted revised maps. The project was appealed to the Central Planning Commission, who heard the case on December 22, 2015. The Central APC staff report extensively addressed arguments submitted by the appellant. The decision of the APC was to grant the appeal in part with the revised findings. The case was further appealed to City Council, objecting to the decision of the APC. New arguments were provided by the appellant. The appeal to City Council includes the same arguments discussed at the APC public hearings. On May 3, 2016, the applicant's attorney submitted additional language supporting the MND along with an air quality study. The city has reviewed the supplemental materials provided by the applicant with its independent judgment and find that it supports and is consistent with the adoption of the MND. The proposed map layout for VTT 72367-SL has not changed since the letter of determination was released on September 15, 2015, nor after the Central Area Planning Commission determination on January 12, 2016. However, neither the original MND nor the first reconsideration circulated the technical studies performed for the environmental analysis. Hence, the MND was recirculated with the technical studies, the supporting language from the applicant. The MND was also recirculated for reconsideration for consideration in any future legal proceedings for this case. The project will not create any substantial impacts beyond what has been previously analyzed in the original environmental assessment. As the previously issued Mitigated Negative Declaration, ENV 2013-1998-MND addresses the potential environmental impacts of the proposed projects, the mitigation measures imposed still serve to mitigate the impacts of the project to less than significant levels as required by the California Environmental Quality Act. The recirculated Mitigative Negative Declaration, its technical documents, supporting language, and the associated mitigation monitoring program are recommended for adoption by the City Council. And staff is available for questioning.
Thank you. Any questions or comments at this time? Okay, we'll go to public comment. I have 3 individuals who have identified themselves as representatives for the appellant. Daniel Wright, Sam Trude, and Kurt Gibbs.
Councilman, are you going to hear from the appellant first, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
No, I thought you were calling somebody else, that's all.
No, okay. I'm here. So, Mr. Wright, you have identified yourself in the application as the representative for the Mr. Tornquist, who is the appellant of record. Would you want to take the 5 minutes, and then these other individuals take the 1 minute, Sam Trude and Kurt Gibbs?
I'm not even sure about if they have identified themselves as...
oh, okay. Well, you're the...
Maybe they're the applicant, I don't know.
They're the applicants.
Yes. Right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
We'll take their support.
That was wrong. Okay. So you go, Mr. Wright. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. That's correct.
Daniel Wright, on behalf of the appellant, Doug Tornquist, let the record reflect that we submitted to the record today our continuing analysis of this project. I wanted to highlight especially the report, which is at the very end of the letter, including the pictures of the exposed bedding planes and the analysis by our expert, geologic expert, of the geologic analysis provided in the supporting report for this project. This project will extend outward over this hillside. This is a very steep hillside below. Our expert concluded that there was not sufficient analysis of these adverse sloped bedding planes, and that they are interlaid with types of clay which can be very slippery during wet periods of time. Councilmember Weezer, you may remember the famous landslides on Mount Washington, where I live, where it was the same Puente Formation that's identified in this project. Also, the MND here talks about that some of these mitigation measures are imposed as to mitigate archaeological matters, but there is no identification of the archaeological matters in the MND, and that also is another deficiency. In addition, during this project presentation before the Area Planning Commission, our expert, traffic expert, had analyzed and established a significant problem with cumulative impacts of all of these small lot subdivisions and single-family homes collectively in the area, especially further aggravated by the road diet that's been imposed on Rowena, which is immediately adjacent to Waverly, where this project is located. Mr. Basirian, our expert, has responded further to the city's critique. The city basically tried to say that he hadn't accurately summarized or identified all of the various projects, but even if you just considered it plus or minus in terms of error, the number of cumulative projects far exceeds the city's threshold of significance with respect to the need to do environmental analysis for cumulative impacts. This has been a serious deficiency of the city's environmental review of small lot subdivisions, and this appellant is ready to make a test case, because there is a lot of anger in the communities about these projects, that they're not being sufficiently mitigated, and our traffic report documents the potential severity of that, with no response from the city. And as you know, the legal standard for review for an EIR is if there is a fair argument. Here we have reports from our traffic expert responding to and refuting staff's inadequate critique of his work. And second of all, now a geologic analysis, which was part of our ongoing review of this project, which shows that the project may be located in the area of the property where there is serious adverse conditions for causing a landslide. So those two issues alone are significant. Also, the project here is inconsistent with the city's own regulations with regard to the driveway width. This is supposed to be 20 feet in width. The project, as proposed, is less than that. And because of that, a violation of the city's own laws would mean that under Section 11.02 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code, there could be no building permit issued because it violates the city's own laws. Additionally, this whole process of dropping the ZA request appears to be an effort on the part of either the developer or the planning staff or both to evade the small lot subdivision guidelines, which really are a means by which we measure whether or not the project is consistent with the general plan. And in this particular case, our objection letter contains the analysis of this problem of not being consistent with the small lot subdivision guidelines. And as you know, there's been a lot of controversy about those issues as well. That has not yet been resolved. So there is a lot of unresolved issues that justify the preparation for an EIR. This is a large enough project to justify it, and you should so order. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wayne Arasho.
Just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, I represent the applicant. We're supporting a denial of the appeal.
Okay, and you are entitled through the policies followed in this committee for 5 minutes. All other speakers have 1 minute.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is really a perfect filing. We're in compliance. This is RD, as the staff said, RD 1.5 zoning. By right, my client can build 10 attached dwelling units. We comply. We're building 5 dwelling units under the Small Lot Ordinance. We comply with the ordinance. We're not seeking any variances, any ZA determinations or adjustments. We comply with the small lot design guidelines. We did an amendment, an addendum to the mitigated negative declaration. Our environmental consultant added more analysis, and there were no new impacts. They studied the cumulative impacts. The document publicly recirculated. There were no comments during the time period. I understand opposing counsel talked about a letter filed yesterday or today, but there was only one letter filed, and it was advisory only. It was not from the appellant. So we're in total compliance. We volunteered in discussions with the council office to go beyond total compliance. We would install additional landscaping trees between our property and the appellant's property. We would install trellises. There's an existing wall between the two properties. The appellant's house next door is a very large complex, a house and a recording studio. But importantly, the wall that faces my client's property is a blank wall. There's no windows on the appellant's property. So there's no privacy issues here. My client got this filing right, and the city got this right. The client designed it, again, without variances. City planning staff recommended approval at the tentative map stage. The advisory agency approved it. It went on appeal to the Area Planning Commission, unanimous support for my client's project and denial of the appeal. So the city, Mayor Garcetti, we need housing, and here's a developer who comes along, builds quality developments, complies with every city code. There's not much more we can do. As to opposing counsel's comment about a critique, geological critique, as you know, a soils report was filed. The advisory agency asked all the city departments to comment. There was no problems there. Opposing counsel said half of what CEQA says. CEQA states it's a fair argument and must produce significant effects before an EIR is required. Significant effects. This MND, these 5 lots, where by right my client can build 10, there are no significant impacts. And the fire lane issue, it is not a fire lane, it is a private driveway. Staff knows this, it is a private driveway, therefore not required to have the 20 feet of width, private driveway 16 feet in full compliance. So the staff looked at this at the advisory agency level, at the planning commission level, and today, and we're in compliance. So I thank you, and we respectfully request a denial of the appeal.
Thank you. Sam Trude, Kurt Gibbs.
Hi, Commissioner. Sam Trude, the project representative for this project. I'd like to just touch on a couple of comments made by the appellant as it relates to conformance and adverse conditions, and also the fire lane issues. So as it relates to adverse conditions and conformance with the neighbourhood, I'd just like to show this drawing, which is an aerial shot of our proposed development, which you can see with an overlay. As you can see, the neighbourhood is extremely diverse, ranging from single-family homes all the way up to our immediate neighbour, which is a 42-unit, 4-storey apartment building. Now, in regards to, layout and conformance and adverse effects based on, topography and topology, we looked at a multitude of different layouts on this project spanning the last 3 to 4 years of planning and community engagement, ranging from 10 units to 7 units and ultimately 5 units. As you can see, our project extends no further than any of the neighbouring projects on this boundary. In actual fact, we're 20 foot set back from our neighbouring property. So as it relates to topography and conformance and adverse conditions, we're well and truly in conformance with the topography as it was stated, in line with our soils engineer report that was submitted and approved. Now, as it relates to the 20-foot driveway access, this is not a fire lane. The driveway from the curb to the property is within 150 feet, so it's not a fire lane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kurt Gibbs.
I think Mr. Trude and Mr. Appershaw have covered things quite well. I think in light of the fact that the appellant has tried to stop this development for the primary reason that it's just next door to his property is evidenced by the fact that he tried to use the historical commission prior to this to stop the project. It was clear to the commission at that time that there was no basis, and we're here before you today because he doesn't want the project next door to his house. We're in full compliance, and we respectfully request that you give us our approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal Heatherly. Is that correct, Heatherly?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the group that is trying to move forward with the small lot subdivision project here. There's a huge lack of housing in the Silver Lake community, and I've worked with the developers previously in other areas, and they have done amazing projects and brought beautiful housing into the communities, and I feel that at this point there is a huge need for more housing in Silver Lake. This is in a fantastic school district. There are people that are not being able to find homes and having to buy outside of the Silver Lake community because of lack of projects like this. I've worked on multiple projects with these developers. They do amazing construction, and I highly recommend that you move forward to approve this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Herman?
We're on item 7, right, sir? So you heard the people, we're talking about density. How much more density can you crowd up in a neighborhood? The developer has no interest in the homeless. They have no interest in those of us who are in low income, those of us who make a meager wage under $30,000 a year. We can't afford it. But somehow pay-to-play players come in here and think, oh, we can swindle these fools. But not Mr. Dawson. Mr. Dawson knows what's up. We're old school boys, just like Mr. Cedillo and I when we stopped that big multi-facility going up there in Highland Park. You can't build on a slope that's going to harm the public and endanger the public. And besides this restricts parking. You need to look into the impact of the community, our safety, and all the resources of the fire department to get in there and protect us from any danger.
Thank you. From Council District 5, Julia Duncan. On item 5. It did say, my little sticker here did say CD5. I'm sorry. Look, it's for the record.
CD4, Julia Duncan, Councilman David Rue's office. Thank you so much for having us here today. We do support the advisory agency's approval of the tract map. We also support the Central Area Planning Commission's decision to deny the appeal. This project is 50% of the allowable density for the property. It could go up to 10 units. They're going for 5 small lot subdivisions. There are no variances being requested or zoning administrator adjustments. It's within the height, the setback, all of the other zoning requirements for the property. With that being said, we are deeply saddened that the two sides were not able to come together over the past few months and the various appeals that have been processed. And we would strongly recommend that the appellant and the applicant try to get together before this item comes to council to address some of the lingering mitigation issues that have been brought up during those discussions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, let's, if I could move to recommend that we deny the appeal based upon the planning department's representations that it's consistent with the small lot division guidelines and all other guidelines in the area. And at the request of CD4, so any objections to that? Seeing none, so ordered. And when is this in council? City Clerk?
The 29th.
29th of June. Okay. Thank you. So ordered. Deny the appeal. Thank you. Next item 6.
Item 6, Councilman, this is a CEQA appeal filed by Sylvie Shane relative to the adequacy of the MND as well as a zone variance for off-site parking in CD13.
Good afternoon. Jenna Monterosa with City Planning, and I'll be here speaking on behalf of Zoning Administrator Jim Tokunaga, who took an action on this case. I was a staff planner on this project. This project involves a conversion of an existing 18-unit apartment building into a 24-unit boutique hotel. On December 21st, 2015, the Zoning Administrator approved multiple entitlements under case number 2015-2683, CU, Zone Variance and Zoning Administrator's Adjustment, including a request for conditional use to permit a hotel use in the Q R4-2 zone, a zone variance to permit off-site parking to be located 925 feet from the use it serves, and an adjustment to permit a 9-foot 5-inch rear yard in lieu of the required 15 feet for an existing non-conforming building in the QR4-2 zone. The entire action, including the adopted mitigated negative declaration, ENV 2015-2684-MND, were subsequently appealed to the Central Area Planning Commission. At its meeting on March 8, 2016, the Area Planning Commission considered the appeal. However, the Commission failed to act, which resulted in the automatic denial of the appeal and reaffirmation of the determination of the Zoning Administrator. The Zoning Administrator's action on the conditional use and the Zoning Administrator's adjustment became final and were not further appealable. On April 11th of this year, the approved zone variance and corresponding environmental clearance were further appealed to City Council, which is the appeal that is before you today. Since the filing of the second level appeal, the applicant has withdrawn the zone variance request, approval rather, for parking because they've determined that parking is no longer, the parking requirements that is no longer required of the project. The project is capable of complying with parking requirements pursuant to the municipal code without seeking any discretionary approvals. So what is left before you is the appeal of the mitigated negative declaration. The appeal points raised discuss impacts on traffic and refer to additional trips to and from the site. As described in the adopted MND, a significant impact to traffic would occur if the proposed project would generate and or cause a diversion of shift of 500 or more daily trips or 43 or more PM or AM peak hour vehicular trips on the street system. The conversion of a vacant 18-unit apartment building into a 24-room boutique hotel, which will not increase the existing building footprint, was determined by the Department of Transportation to result in a net increase of 76 total daily trips. This increase, however, was not determined to have a new impact on PM or AM peak hour trip counts. This is partially due to the off-peak hours that hotels typically operate in. As a result, the project was not required to conduct a traffic study and was thereby determined to not have a significant impact on traffic. The appeal additionally describes impacts to parking, stating that there is not enough available street or public parking in the area. As described, the applicant has determined that they will be able to meet all code required parking and has withdrawn their zone variance. Additionally, given the project's location in close proximity to the Hollywood and Highland transit stop as well as the Metro Rapid line, the project site is located in a transit priority area, which pursuant to CEQA permits exemptions to environmental impacts, particularly with regards to parking. Finally, the appeal states that the project would have substantial impact on population and housing, as well as the socioeconomic balance in the area. With regards to a loss of housing, the existing 18-unit apartment building, which has been vacant since 2013, does not reach the city's established CEQA threshold of a loss of 25 or more multifamily units and was therefore considered to be a less than significant impact. With regards to a displacement of substantial number of people, the project baseline that was considered by staff was a vacant building that had been removed from the rental housing market in 2013, with all procedures completed in compliance with the city's Housing and Community Investment Department. Finally, pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15131, a socioeconomic impact is not to be treated as a significant effect on the environment. With that, staff maintains that the project would not have a significant effect upon the environment and recommends that the appeal of the project's MND be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for staff? We'll open it up for public comment, and first is the appellant, Sylvie Shane.
May I have 6 minutes, please? I've prepared a statement.
We allocate 5 minutes per appellant and applicant. We try to stay consistent with that. Thank you. So 5 minutes.
May I request an additional minute, please? There are significant issues that really need to be addressed.
Yeah, I stay consistent and fair with everyone and try not to veer from that so that we keep consistent and fair with everyone. So we'll keep it at 5 minutes. I apologize for that.
Will it be allowed a rebuttal time?
There's no rebuttal here now. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you for consideration of this appeal. I would like to start out by stating for the record that I have appealed this project at personal cost, strictly out of public interest, and on behalf of the community because I believe it to be a precedent-setting project that will individually and cumulatively result in the loss of much-needed rent-stabilized housing units. This at a time when the city has admitted that its top priority is to provide more housing units, not less, to meet growing demand for housing that is in large part created by the continuous and increasing amount of displacement of previously housed individuals through demo, conversions, and evictions. Displacement induces demand while decreasing supply of available and affordable housing options. While economics motivate property owners to pursue the most profitable opportunities, the city is charged with the task of balancing those motivations with sound land use policies designed to balance its needs with property rights through our city's general plan, and more specifically, its housing element. Current vacancy rates for multifamily properties hover around 2 to 3%, which according to the housing element indicates an imbalance. Furthermore, according to the new affordable housing fee benefit study, which you have before you, units constructed over the last 10 years hover around 12% vacancy. This indicates that older RSO housing stock is in high demand. The economic incentive to displace long-term tenants for short-term transient occupancy is well documented in a lean policy brief, Short-Term Rentals and Los Angeles Loss of Housing. It's leading to the current decision of the city to implement an STR, short-term rental ordinance. This policy objective is in direct conflict to the proposed project before you. The housing element in its executive summary, which I've submitted, lists housing preservation as one of its goals. It states the city intends to rehabilitate and conserve and preserve existing housing stock, and goes on to state that conservation includes the preservation of existing housing through activities that prevent the loss of housing units, such as zoning that ensures continued residential use. CEQA requires that a project be in compliance with the stated objectives of the city's general and specific plans and the current and future policy objectives of the city. Any potentially significant impact, whether individual, cumulative, direct, or indirect, must be identified and mitigated. Under the LA CEQA Thresholds Guide, for which I have provided the relevant section, it clearly states under population and housing displacement the screening criteria. Would the project result in the net loss of any existing housing units affordable to very low or low income households as defined by federal and or city standards through demo, conversion, or other means? The answer here is yes, and is supported by the document filed by the property owner with the city at the time he filed the Ellis Act. I've provided the rental rates that were in effect at the time that he filed with the city, and it meets those limits. Those rents meet in Exhibit J2.1 maximum affordable rent for very low and low-income households in the city of LA. The contention that these units were vacant and therefore displacement is not to be considered would be equivalent to saying that consumption does not drive production. If the city takes that stance, then no project in the city will have to be connected to the displacement that it causes, because every building will be rendered vacant before submitting for project approval. Buildings in large part are rendered vacant in order to entitle them for other uses. This contention is validated by a similar project less than a mile away at a 50-unit building called the Villa Carlotta, where I am the last remaining tenant, and which the property owners aim to convert to a boutique hotel under the premise that it too has been withdrawn from the rental market under the Ellis Act, and therefore will have no impact on housing supply. Whether you consider this a direct or indirect impact, CEQA requires it to be identified. In determining whether there is an associated environmental impact with population and housing displacement, I beg you to consider that question the next time you have to step over or around a homeless person on the sidewalk, under a bridge, or anywhere you walk. Are human bodies finding shelter on our streets not causing environmental impact and a public safety impact? 3 times in the last month, I have stepped outside my building to take my dog on his last walk of the day to find the front door stopped by the body of a homeless man sleeping on my front stoop. As a single female, that is a tremendous compromise of my security. It's no secret homelessness is on the rise, and 1850 Cherokee is an example of it. 2 former tenants out of the 18 units became homeless and are still without permanent housing 3 years later. One lives on couches by the benevolence of friends, and the other is currently living in a car. Furthermore, Goal 4 of the city's housing element, Chapter 6, Goals, Policies, and Objectives, is to be a city committed to preventing and ending homelessness. The fact that this site previously housed 2 individuals who are currently without permanent housing raises reasonable doubt as to whether or not allowing the conversion of this site to other use is in line with the stated goals of the general plan. If we are serious about addressing homelessness, it starts with recognizing the contributing factors, and we must recognize that it is the cumulative impact of all these projects that is contributing to the crisis we now face. CEQA is designed to identify and mitigate all potentially significant cumulative impacts, but with so many projects like this being approved under mitigative negative declarations that do not even consider these impacts, it comes as no surprise that we have a housing and homeless crisis. We are selling ourselves our poison pill. I submit to you the copies of the statement so you can read the rest.
Great, thank you. Michael Gonzalez, representative for the applicant.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Honorable Council members. Michael Gonzalez, representing the applicant. First, I want to touch that these issues and everything before you has been raised at 2 prior public hearings. There have been multiple opportunities to appeal and address these concerns, so not the first time that they're heard. At none of these instances, however, has there been any significant evidence presented that would support a fair argument that the MND is inadequate. We've heard a lot of opinion, a lot of discussion, but never any evidence. And the heart of CEQA is to provide evidence that the MND is inadequate. As pointed out by staff, the project doesn't even meet the screening criteria for further analysis. The City of Los Angeles' guidelines require additional analysis when 25 housing units are displaced, and we don't meet that here. In fact, the MND concluded that there is no impact because there was no analysis required because we did not meet the screening criteria. And again, the statements made by the appellant and what was submitted to the record to date does not support any fair argument that there is an impact on the environment. Secondly, we are not, this property is not an affordable housing project as defined by law. There are no affordability covenants recorded on the property. It was rent stabilized because it had a certificate of occupancy prior to October of 1978, but the property was legally removed from the rental market as allowed by Ellis over 3 years ago. We went through the housing process to do that, and that is a right that is given by state law and implemented by city ordinance. While we are sympathetic to the housing crisis that's occurring at the moment, we have to recognize that the baseline for the analysis of this project is a vacant building. It's a building that has been unoccupied for 3 years. It's a building that was properly LS'd and removed from the rental market for a different project. The project before you today didn't come to Genesis until more recently when a prior project no longer worked. So the purpose of this hotel was not to remove those units. Those units were already off of the market. In terms of process, we have withdrawn the variance, which is why we're here today. The variance was for parking, which we now can supply and provide pursuant to the city code. With that variance was another appellate right that was the mitigated negative declaration. That's a creature of state law and the state CEQA guidelines that require the ability to appeal a CEQA document to the legislative body. We do not have an implementing ordinance at the local level to address how that happens. And this is back to the due process point I raised earlier. There have been multiple hearings here and multiple opportunities to raise these concerns, all of which have been adjudicated in favor of the applicant. Once we've withdrawn our variance, the MND appeal came with that as well. It's no longer before you from a procedural standpoint. Nevertheless, as I repeated at the beginning, there is nothing in the record to support any of the contentions that we have a significant impact on the environment. Our trip generation is so low that a traffic study was not required. The City of LA's Department of Transportation would require a small study, as we call them, technical memorandum, if a project has 25 to 42 trips, and a full study, additional intersections analysis, if you're above 42 trips. And that's in the AM or PM peak hour. We have 76 trips throughout the course of the day, with none in the AM or PM peak hour, and therefore a traffic study was not required. Again, just to repeat, this property was removed from the rental market 3 years ago for a different project. It's been vacant since that time. There's nothing before you to support any of the contentions besides speculation and opinion that we have any impacts on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. J.T. Lawson. Dana Sales after J.T. Lawson.
J.T. Lawson, I'm a former resident at 1850 North Cherokee Avenue. I was also manager and had to work with the owners who own the building. During that process, I'm very aware that there is no sympathy. So when they say sympathy, they have sympathy on the situation. There's none at all. In fact, the manager from the other building, the Carlisle, heard directly from David Lesser that they need to get these roaches out of here, and they weren't talking about the little bugs. They were talking about the human beings. And while the Cherokee was vacant and there was a possibility of somebody else maybe purchasing the property, there were several other potential buyers that were in the same mindset. So there's something common going on with a lot of these property owners that are buying up property and converting them, period. The property was vacant because they did extract people. Some of them, they had signed a contract to avoid getting the money that they were supposed to be paid.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Dana Sales, George Abrams.
Hi, Dana Sales, 360. I wanted to follow up on Mr. Gonzalez's comments. I've been working with the applicant on this project for the course of the last year. There's two things that I want this committee to know. As part of the project, we have engaged in a site agreement with Hollywood Heritage, who has supported the project, and we've provided a letter of support for this, and an agreement to fully rehabilitate the building in accordance with the standards of the Secretary of Interior. Hollywood Heritage was one of the organizations that was really instrumental to helping this really become a public amenity for the community, as hotels tend to do. So I just wanted to put that on record for you, and again, urge your denial of this appeal. Thank you.
George Abrams, Annie Gagan.
In the staff report, the report droned on for page after page about how this is really a residential project. But in Venice, another hotel project report that I looked at, the site plan review claimed that it was entitled to exemption from the amenities finding in a site plan review because it was a commercial project. And this is just the kind of doublespeak that we have long come to expect from the city planning department. And it's just more proof of the fundamentally dishonest nature of the city planning department. And I think that Vince Bertoni should look into these contradictory two projects, where one claims it's residential and the other it claims it's commercial. And so another thing is that since this project is over the Hollywood fault, it's actually unconscionable for the city to approve a new approval for human habitation over the active Hollywood fault.
Thank you. After Ms. Gagan is Mickey Jackson.
Hi. I heard you all speak eloquently today at City Council regarding the homeless crisis, the affordable housing crisis. This comes under our homeless crisis. I was at the Planning Commission hearing. I was at a neighborhood council meeting. I heard the homeless people who got tossed out because of this project, living in his car, a U.S. Marine homeless because of this project. I live in the neighborhood. This is a residential area about to be under threat by more hotel conversions, throwing out good rent-stabilized residential housing to make a boutique hotel. And as the planning commissioner who voted could not approve it that day said, we do not need more hotels in this area. There's 12 being built and proposed. What we need to protect is our residential housing. Guys, you're setting a precedent here. I support Save Cherokee. I live in the neighboring community. Cherokee is under threat. The current residents all spoke at the hearings, no certainty that their building owners will do the same thing and follow suit if this goes through. Please protect our residential housing. We have a crisis here.
Jennifer Daines. Okay. After Mickey, Mark Simon.
Hi, Mickey Jackson, Coalition to Preserve LA. Again, we are behind and pushing, and we have a lot of partners, the initiative for neighborhood integrity initiative. And this clearly, to me, is why we need this initiative. People need more transparency, and they need a bigger voice in these things. The money from developers is just so loud that it drowns out the community voices. We had a big article in the LA Times today about Airbnb. It's the current boogeyman, okay? It's bad if residential units, I don't care whether they were taken off by the Ellis Homeless Act, 3 years ago, if residential affordable units are taken off the market. But if it's a hotel with all these people who can make donations and call their juice friends, then it's a good thing. That's a double standard. Either way you look at it, people lose affordable housing. We need an initiative to give our residents a bigger voice.
Mark Simon, and then Chris Cuellar.
Hi, Mark Simon from the Los Angeles Tenants Union, someone who has experienced the Ellis Act firsthand, the devastation it causes. I'd just like to include something from Sylvie. She wrote that the project does sit on a fault line. See the map that she's included that is not indicated on the MND. that's important. It hasn't been mentioned that the project does. I would just like to say that the gentleman supporting the project said there was no hard evidence. Everything that the people supporting this appeal, he said there's no hard evidence. I would suggest that he just walk outside this building and in maybe 20 feet in any direction, and he'll get some hard evidence about the devastation that projects like this cause in terms of homeless impact. It's ridiculous to say that there's no hard evidence. My God, we're all living with it. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris Cuellar, Heather Fox.
Thank you. I'm Chris Cuellar. I'm with the LA Tenants Union. And I just want to bring up the point that, yes, or also support the fact that this is setting a dangerous precedent for the abuse of the Ellis Act. We're seeing this across the city. So, even if this doesn't meet, or if this is under the minimum requirements for having, a negative environmental impact, I just want to stress that lots of projects that are under the minimum have a major negative impact. So we need to really stop these kinds of projects from going through. And also, we're all for rehabbing historic buildings, but there's no better public amenity than rent-stabilized housing and affordable housing. Thank you.
Heather Fox, James Moriarty.
Hello, my name is Heather Fox. I am supporting the appeal of the hotel conversion at 1850 Cherokee Avenue. My child attends the Canyon School Co-op preschool at 1820 Las Palmas, 1 block away. And it has never been more important that this neighborhood retain its community members. There are many facilities that are used by us and the former residents of 1850 Cherokee, such as the Canyon School Co-op, the Las Palmas Senior Center, the Yucca Community Center, the YMCA, the Public Library, Hollywood High School, and more. Promoting an increasing transient population in Hollywood will negatively impact these facilities and the people who use them. Most importantly, I ask you to consider the safety issue involved when there are children present. And when it comes to transient residents and the temporary visitors such as this hotel, while it would attract, please consider a proper environmental review of this project and the impact continued destruction of RSO units has on our permanent residents. Mayor Garcetti proposed a budget of $138 million to fix the homeless problem.
Thank you very much. James Moriarty.
Good day, good day. In 2013, me and my family and 16 other families were displaced into the Hollywood community. We were forced by eviction and by legal action to be threatened by force to be removed from our apartments. We left the apartments guaranteed in writing a chance to return to the property in the condo project. These guys want to make up their minds about big money here, big money there, but we're left in the cold. We're left and forgotten. We took the money out of guarantee that we would come back to the property to get a condo unit that was guaranteed to us in writing, and all of a sudden that's off the table and no one knows anything about it and we're all forgotten. 10 disabled veterans, 17 whole families that were in the Hollywood community in District 13 that were hard-paying, tax-paying citizens that are being forgotten, swept under the rug because big money wants to change their mind. This isn't fair to us, this isn't fair to Hollywood, this isn't fair to human people, this isn't fair to us as people, as residents, as hardworking people, this isn't fair to us. This place has been occupied. As far as safety, going up that hill, any increase in traffic up that hill is going to cost lives of people of Los Angeles. Mark my words. God bless you.
Thank you. Joanna Martin and Susan. Joanna Martin here. Susan. And then Herman.
To stand on my toes. I was evicted by Alice, my historically protected, supposedly apartment I had for 30 years. You never quite recover from that. I dream about my old apartment all the time. And now I see it happen to dozens, probably hundreds, probably thousands of other people. It's inhumane. It's unconscionable what's going on. In terms of the homeless, one of my fellow tenants is homeless. I would say every building, some become homeless. I faced homelessness, and I still face it because I may be Ellis'd again. In terms of the earthquake, I've come to accept a reality. Developers, yeah, so we lose thousands of people in an earthquake. Think of the money we make until that happens. I've realized that's the mentality we're dealing with. And has that applicant ever been to the intersection of Franklin and Cherokee during the summer? Talk about evidence. He needs to go just stand there and watch the traffic, which doesn't move. It goes back miles.
Thank you. Herman?
Well, you heard it. Mr. B agrees. You're making the condition worse. The war on homelessness, the crisis on stabilization rent. What the fuck's happening with this city? It's going to hell. It's going to hell. And that's what the people don't have the nerve to say, but I'm speaking on their behalf. It's going to hell. Provide us rental stabilization. Veterans are in the street. Their families are in the street. I and my animal are in the street for 8 fucking years. And not the county nor the city can provide me with rent stabilization. A fucking voucher that gets me nowhere. A voucher. And you have family, you have children in here that can't get a rental agreement that allows us on our income to afford housing. That's real manly of all you. It's fucked up.
Chris Robertson from CD 13.
Good afternoon, council members. Chris Robertson, Planning Director for Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell of the 13th District. Prior to the councilman taking office, the city approved an application to demolish the existing 1930s structure on the subject site and develop market rate condominiums. As a result, the owner filed a notice of intent to withdraw the residential units from the rental market as allowed under the Ellis Act. Soon after, the CRA signed off on the demolition permit. Things changed course, and as a result, we are before you today. As you know, the councilman is a major champion of affordable housing. In addition to working to adopt an incentive-based value capture policy that will increase affordable housing production across the city, he has introduced a number of motions related to preserving the city's rent-stabilized housing stock, revisiting the city's rent stabilization ordinance, and earmarking a portion of the city's boomerang funds for affordable housing. Recently, the councilman also introduced a number of resolutions to support bills proposed at the state level, one of which would increase notice and requirements for families with children that are facing Ellis evictions, and another which would authorize local government to adopt inclusionary housing requirements previously struck down by the courts. This is not a project that the councilman supports, but is one that he inherited. The city is bound by the Ellis Act, and the rental units are already vacant. The building is approved for demolition and the site for development of market rate condominiums. The councilman cannot force the property owner to return these units to the rental market. The current proposal preserves the existing 1930s building, and as the applicant mentioned, they've agreed to restore it to the Secretary of the Interior standards. This will help to preserve the character of the existing neighborhood, and we are committed to working with the owner and the community to ensure the operation of the boutique hotel is sensitive to its residential surroundings. Throughout the process, we have deferred to the Planning Department and Commission, who denied the previous appeals related to the use. As you have heard, the variance request has also been withdrawn. The only thing before you today is the environmental determination, and after extensively reviewing the issues around this case, we see no grounds on which to grant the appeal based on the California Environmental Quality Act. Thank you very much. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Can we have staff come up, please? I know some of you turned in cards after public comment has begun. It's a policy of this committee that you turn in cards after public comment has been called for, those items that will be deemed late. So on this item, I read in the record that when the previous owner moved people under the Ellis Act, that some of them did not receive the relocation assistance. Is that accurate? Or
I can't speak on behalf of the housing department.
Yeah.
What planning did was contact housing to make sure that it was properly Ellis, and they confirmed that they submitted all their proper paperwork to Elicit. And the zoning administrator in the determination stated that, I'm going to read it into the record here. He said that the only items up for a decision by the planning department are the requested conditional use, zone variance, and adjustment. They submitted items to file which indicate that they submitted the proper notification and notice intent to withdraw to the rental housing. He did not state that he's validating everything, but that he conferred with the housing department, and that's his, what's before him is a vacant building, and the items before him at which he approved.
Okay, so that's on the planning side. Mr. Bertoni, when we get these projects before us on the seeking an entitlement and or a new use on a property, is there something in the documents that flag to the decision maker that the property under question is under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance or the Ellis Act? Does anything flag us to that effect?
I'll ask Mr. Roush to come up to the microphone to address that.
The question again, Council Member. This is Charlie Roush.
Whenever there's an applicant for an entitlement and or there's a change of use for a property, do we get somehow flagged in our documents that this property is under the Rent Stabilization Ordinance or the Ellis Act?
Generally not. I haven't seen one in a case file.
Okay, because I've been looking at a number of projects that come through this committee, and whenever we are converting uses, I've always wondered what's the cumulative impact of all these units now getting off the market for rent stabilization. And I understand that they get relocation assistance, et cetera, but at some point we should have an odometer in the city that tells us, look, you're taking off all these units from rent stabilization. And if we continue to do this while the right arm is doing it in planning, does the left arm really know, the housing department who is in charge of this, know what we're doing over here?
Right. Generally, they'll tell us whether or not they've gone through the Ellis Act, because particularly in my case, because I was around when the Rent Stabilization Ordinance was passed, so I'm fairly familiar with it. Yeah. But we really don't, so I could look at a building and say, this is subject to rent stabilization. The only thing that we really have to control rent stabilization is when we have density bonus cases now. After Senate Bill 222 was passed last year, developers of density bonus units have to replace the rent-controlled units in their developments, but we really don't have anything in the code that requires that otherwise.
Yeah, I think it would be useful, and I'm certainly going to speak to the planning department, the housing department, to come up with some type of policy that would allow us on this side of the process to see how many rent stabilization units we're losing and or displacing through our entitlements or our...
The only other case that I know of where that's happened is in the Wyvernwood project that's in your district, which is somewhat...
and it's still in the process.
It's still in process, yeah. We haven't made any decision. We're going to hold a rehearing on it.
Yeah, I got it. And in this case, I understand that it's a vacant building. I was quite stunned and shocked to hear that half of the tenants, if true, did not receive relocation assistance. I'm wondering what type of recourse we could have with that prior owner, if any, from the city side. However, with respect to what's before us, it is simply a appeal on CEQA grounds, which to me appears that all CEQA requirements have been made to reverse that. But nonetheless, it does raise a lot of other issues with respect to relocation, the Ellis Act, and our Rent Stabilization Ordinance, and what we can do to improve those processes, which are the basis of
generally, I believe the housing department has a policy that if you file for Ellis Act, you have to, if you decide at a later date to replace that older building with a new building that it's for rental uses, that they have to replace the rent-controlled units, because they basically use the Ellis Act to remove the tenants from it, and then decided to put in another rental building at a much higher rental basis, so they have to replace those rent-controlled units. But that's a policy of the housing department.
Yes. So they have the option, right, of replacing them or providing relocation assistance. Both, right?
No, they're supposed to provide relocation assistance under,
Either way,
I believe, city law.
Okay, thank you. You going to add?
This is Jenna Monterosa with Planning. There's different thresholds when you're dealing with rent-stabilized units. So, and as I was talking with the applicant, the way the housing department takes in those paperwork is that it's all done in good faith, that the applicant has submitted all the paperwork. They've provided relocation fees to those members who are there, met the thresholds. There's different years, different age requirements, and family size thresholds. But those who did not meet a threshold were asked to sign a waiver, and it's my understanding that those residents did sign the waiver, and so there may have been some that didn't receive relocation assistance, but that speaks to a bigger issue. It wasn't before the zoning administrator. So.
Mr. Cedillo?
Councilman, I just want to make one correction.
Sure.
The housing department also notifies us when we're in the coastal areas to enforce the Mellow Act.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cedillo?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your inquiries and for your leadership on this specific issue. It appears there are several factors in front of us that at least compel me to support the appeal. I recognize the restrictions that are before us, but there seems to have been some question about the types of waivers that were signed and what were the conditions or circumstances. I'm not suggesting that this is a bait and switch by the previous owner at the inception. It's not for me to say. I don't know what was on their mind, but there does appear to be tenants who were not given relocation. There does appear, and we've heard testimony from those who were told that there was going to be an opportunity for them to come back, a contract to come back into the substitute condominiums. That appears to be a breach of a contract. I don't know if we've got any good cause for that. And so, while this may not be a perfect matter within the framework of planning, it is, at least for me, enough to support the appeal. Because there are an abundance of challenges. We had a robust debate this morning about homelessness and affordability. I know all of us have strong opinions about both and are committed to both. I think this is a unique circumstance given how people were moved out, what were the conditions and circumstances, and then the failure to complete what the commitments that were made. Condos are not being built, people are not being given an opportunity to put back, and people have been basically put asunder. And so for that, I move to support the appeal.
Terry Kaufman, Macias, City Attorney's Office. I think the Planning Department wants to read again, just so it's clear before you vote, whether or not the Ellis issues even have a CEQA impact, which we're here today on a CEQA appeal. So I'd just like her to read that again into the record.
Yeah, I just wanted to restate that the discussion before you with regards to the Ellis Act is speaking about a larger socioeconomic issue. But as I mentioned in my initial presentation, pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15131, socioeconomic impact is not to be treated as a significant impact before CEQA, which is why staff and the planning department is maintaining that the project and the MND be maintained and adopted, and that the appeal be denied. So I just wanted to make sure that was read into the record. I think there's two different issues at hand here, but what's before you is just the CEQA appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff. Is there, by any chance, anybody from housing that's here?
No, there is not.
I appreciate the comments and want to associate myself with the comments of Mr. Cedillo. I think it's troubling the amount of questions that remain at this point, and this thing has been in process for a long, long time. So the idea that we show up today and we don't even know if people got the basic relocation fees. And so while, you know, the spirit or the letter might have been met, the spirit, you know, is being violently violated in this case because, as I understand the law and my team's reading of this, now we allow a hotel to happen. 2 years later, the person can say, I want to turn this to rental units at market rate.
Well, it's my understanding under the Ellis Act, if they return the building to rental within 7 years of having been Ellis, they need to provide those units at rent stabilized as they were previously.
So it sends them, and you know, I do worry about the precedent because there are a number of companies that operate in my district that do this kind of thing. They buy something, they say they want to do one thing, they don't ever do it, and then after time passes, they come and propose something else that violates the spirit. And so I want to second Mr. Cedillo's motion. And you know, on this, I would love to get this question of the relocation fees resolved, separate and apart. I understand we're not voting on that today, but I think that's a very serious pact that we make with people who rent apartments in this city that we need to make sure is taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's been a motion to grant the appeal and second, and I'm going to. So that's I'm gonna have to vote no on the motion. And although I do think that this is an exhibit as to why the city itself needs to correct its the way it handles the rent stabilization ordinance and the Ellis Act. What's before us in this committee today is the only matter before us is the consideration of the appeal on the environmental clearance, which is the mitigated negative declaration. And on that one sole issue alone, the record before me at least appears to be that this project meets those requirements. And I certainly understand my colleagues' point of view. If the matter of the Ellis Act was before us, I'd ask that we even get the city attorney involved to see what type of recourse these tenants would have, because I think it is appalling as to the condition and the place we're at because of the way we move these tenants, possibly not paying relocation assistance, and now saying, voila, we have a new project now, and this new property owner has no responsibility for those previous tenants. So, but on the issue alone of whether they've met the requirements of environmental clearance, I do believe they have, although I disagree how we got here. So I'm going to have to vote no on that and let the motion move forward on the appeal, that the appeal be granted. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
you have 3 members here. You need 3 to grant the appeal, and you have 2 to 1.
Don't you need 2 because there's 2 members of the present 3?
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. No, you look at the entire number of the committee. So you need a majority, and that would be 3, even though the other 2 members aren't here today.
So
you have a 2 to 1, which will, I guess, go up without.
This is an interesting Robert Rules of Order question. I've always taken it that it is of those members present. You need a majority of those members present, not a majority of the members that make up this committee.
Right.
No, it's
we made quorum at 3. So the chairman's asking, is it not then president voting on the quorum?
You need unanimous. It's not a majority of the members who are present or a majority of the quorum. It's a majority of the committee.
Alternatively, Councilman, since the deadline to act is not till July 1st, you could theoretically bring back the report next week, or the matter rather next week, and ask the Housing Department to report to this committee.
Okay.
Could continue it.
Give me 1 second. Can we come back with a definitive answer at our next meeting as to the protocols used by the city with respect to what makes up a majority of a vote in a committee meeting or a council meeting? In council, I wonder how it's done. I have always been under the impression too that you need those present, a majority of those present. But no, it's 8, right? It's that way. So if we could get a report on that, that'll be appreciated. Okay, and let's do this then. Let's continue this item for the next Plum Committee meeting. We'll clear up the voting record, and we'll also get additional information on the LSAC questions that we asked. And
Will you request housing to be here?
And if housing could be here as well, please. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we'll continue this item to next week, please. Thank you. Next item.
Next item, Councilman, this is a CEQA appeal. It's filed by Patrick Sherman, and it relates to 4 small lots in CD 13.
Do we have staff here on this item, please?
Good afternoon.
Excuse me, Terry Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. I noticed that Councilmember Cedillo has left the room momentarily, so if you care to wait until he comes back, then he can participate in this item, if you want to.
Yes, this is an appeal. We need the attention of the council member, correct, even if he's in the back room. So
right.
If we could call a recess on this meeting and ask staff to see if Mr. Cedillo is returning to the meeting or when he will return. Thank you. Somebody go check on him? Can somebody check on him? His staff? Can you check with his staff?
Vince, how are you? You know what?
Phone is off. Can we get this back on, please? Call this meeting back to order. Okay. Thank you. We'll call this meeting back to order. My microphone is not working for some reason. Hello? Okay, there it goes. Staff, could you want to present an item number 7, please?
Good afternoon, honorable committee members. My name is Nicholas Hendricks, senior planner with the Department of City Planning. I oversee the expedited processing section. I'm also the deputy advisory agent and sit on the advisory agency subdivision committee. I will provide background on this matter, and I am here to answer any questions that you may have. The issue that is before Plum today is the CEQA appeal for this project. All other administrative remedies have been exercised by the appellant through the advisory agency hearing and subsequent appeal hearing held by the Area Planning Commission. The project was approved in November 2015 by the advisory agency pursuant to sections 1222A27 and 1753 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code, otherwise known as LAMC. The Small Lot Ordinance allows multifamily zone properties to be subdivided into individual fee simple lots and provides relief from a number of development standards otherwise required in the zone in which a project is being subdivided. In this case, the project was approved for 4 lots with setbacks ranging from 10 feet to 3 feet. The advisory agency did not approve a specific height, as the height must comply with the zoning requirements. Therefore, there were no approvals to deviate from the applicable height provisions. There are no variances or deviations approved for this project other than what the Small Lot Ordinance already allows. In order for us to approve a subdivision, findings must be made that show conformance with the general plan. Section 1705C of the Los Angeles Municipal Code establishes how a subdivision conforms with the general plan. That section establishes that each tentative map shall be designed in compliance with the zoning applying to the subject property. In this case, the zone that applies to the property is the RD 1.51 zone, which allows a maximum of 4 lots consistent with the 1,500 square foot per lot area requirement. The subdivision map also establishes design standards. Design as defined by the MAP Act, which is in section 66418 of the state code, establishes that design is about street alignments, grades, widths, lot and size configurations, location and size of easements, access and other specific improvements necessary to implement the general plan. Design of the building is not part of the map review process, and that is clearly established in the Government Code section 66427. The MAP Act expressly states that the design and location of buildings is not part of the map review process. Reports were received from the various agencies that analyzed all the improvement requirements, including sewer connections, street alignments, street improvements, lot area improvements, drainage requirements, all of which are required to be met through the administrative permitting process, which is also derived from the general plan. The APC, an appeal was filed to the APC on January 13, 2016, the appellate body denied the appeal, thereby sustaining the decision of the advisory agency. A sequel appeal was filed on February 1st and was transmitted to the clerk on February 9th. And today is the hearing for that particular appeal point. None of the appellant's arguments come close to providing any substantial evidence. In fact, all the positions taken by the appellant are specious. Although the fair argument standard does have a very low threshold, it still has to be based on fact. In this case, appellants ignore and omit the environmental setting and background. The appellant's property was in fact developed in 2007, utilizing architecture that is comprised of a modern style, unlike other homes observed in the area. Appellant's apartment structure is a multi-story structure, yet the appellant argues that the subject subdivision is out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. The advisory agency's conclusions were not achieved through perfidy, but rather through deliberate observation of facts, including textual analysis of the general plan, community plan, zoning code, as well as the Subdivision Map Act. The CEQA evaluation was performed in accordance with state law. Lastly, I have 4 points that I'd like to address. The appellant contends that the city improperly reduced setback requirements for the front yard. This is simply not true. There are no front yard requirements under the Small Lot Ordinance. Appellant claims new residences will significantly shade appellant's property, thereby eliminating sunlight to an appellant's property. There will be no substantial shading effects. In fact, this would be physically impossible. The location of the appellant's property is located upslope and northeast of the subject property, which lies in the southeasterly direction. During the winter solstice, which casts the longest shadows, the sun would not provide a path that would cause substantial shading from the subject property. The appellant claims that the driveway configuration creates a safety hazard. DOT has reviewed this project. There are no concerns issued by DOT, and the driveway actually has to still go through a process of approval by their staff members before they can get a permit issued. And there are no new driveways being created. It's an existing condition. Lastly, the appellant claims that the rooftop decks will facilitate parties and excessive noise. The potential for parties and noise already exists in the existing environmental setting. Anyone can have a party on their property and cause noise. Nuisances caused by excessive noise is already regulated by the city's noise ordinance. In conclusion, we ask that the committee sustain the original decision and find that the CEQA review was adequate under state law. That concludes my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for staff? None. Let's go to the appellant, Noel Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 5 minutes?
5 minutes, yes.
Sir, appreciate it. First, let me clarify that this is not just a CEQA appeal, it's also a Subdivision Map Act appeal. And frankly, I think for purposes of those who are within the purview of my voice or the sound of my voice, I think it's important the fact is to note that we really shouldn't have to file a lawsuit to get a hearing. There appears to be a practice ongoing, and I don't know enough to ascertain the source of it, but when these appeals get filed, you might as well flip a coin in terms of whether or not they're actually going to get heard. And part of what appears to be happening is that appeals are not scheduled, and then statute of limitations deadlines then go, and basically the public ends up getting sandbagged. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it rises to the standard of the city of Los Angeles. So that's something. And by the way, in terms of the record, I gave you all copies of our lawsuit that we had to file in order to basically get this hearing. But that practice basically should stop, and I would ask the chairman, regardless of what the council office says, and I know you have your rule of reciprocity that you want to let the council people decide what goes on in their districts, fine. But when it comes to issues in terms of giving people right of basic due process, particularly when you don't have any protocol. You don't have a CEQA protocol, and you don't have a Subdivision Map Act protocol. And so those issues, if we can't get a resolution, basically will be resolved because we were sandbagged on the Subdivision Map Act protocol, and the recent Superior Court decision says you can't do that. And you have these deemed denied situations where if you don't hear it, it's deemed denied. Well, the problem is it takes away valuable rights. It needlessly confuses and makes needlessly complex a circumstance in a situation where even the proponents of projects don't want it. I think if it's clear going forward, just let the rules be clear, let people follow them, and when people get their hearings, I think basically it should facilitate things. Now, going forward, what we have is a circumstance, again, just to make clear, there is, I respectfully disagree with planning when they say, oh, gee, we can just automatically enter the subdivision ordinance, Small Lot Ordinance, I should say, waive all of the requirements that otherwise would apply. They needed to get a variance for that extra 30% on the front yard setback. Also, with regard to the driveway, same thing. The law says it's got to be 20 feet wide. They say, oh, no, we can do 16. We can do basically what we want. On the guidelines, which everybody says, in fact, the case before you, oh, the guidelines are great, the guidelines are great, the guidelines should be followed, the guidelines need to be respected. You know what? In this case, the guidelines weren't respected, gentlemen. The project is not context sensitive. The developer has not considered the design elements of the four homes, and by the way, there is no plans at all, and yet the approval makes reference to, quote, Exhibit A, which supposedly has the plans that planning approved. So again, left hand, right hand, maybe rote, maybe thoughtless, whatever the case may be, but you can't do business this way, gentlemen. We need to basically follow and abide by what we say we're going to do, and if we can't, then change it. But don't provide a governance model that basically allows the special interested insiders to game the system, because variances are really important, and we seem to be avoiding those responsibilities under either by piecemealing, as we've done here. What's the design going to be? Parties on the roof? Are we going to have a roof? Are we going to have a canopy? What's the deal? Nobody basically knows, and I think that's an important consideration going forward for, again, everybody. The project is not oriented toward the street as suggested. The project is not compatible with the existing neighborhood, which gets into, by the way, the Subdivision Map Act component, which also talks in terms of a requirement that says, yes, we need housing, but it's still got to be compatible. So are we talking about, special interest type circumstance here where we give favored people favored treatment under certain circumstances? My client is trying to protect his tenants. Yes, he's got maybe no legally protectable interest in the views, but you know what? People have to work together in these neighborhoods, and we need to facilitate that. We got to reconcile the conflicting interests, but we can do that. But the community plan says you can't have out-of-scale projects. They need to basically blend. We need to have a circumstance that complements the existing development. Does this really do that? We don't know, because there are basically no plans. They give them, again, the piecemealing where we can basically separate it out, and then pretty much try to manipulate the system going in. And again, it's the old bait and switch. Well, we promise you one thing, procure the approvals, and then all of a sudden, either a new developer or something happens, or we get them switched. I mean, we all know that process. But you know what? It doesn't promote confidence. And it doesn't, I don't think it's consistent with the social contract basically between the people. And again, all of the other details that we talk about, I think, are in the paperwork, which I know you will thoroughly examine when it gets to full council, because I think we have an entitlement to have the full council hear this beyond just putting it on the consent calendar, notwithstanding our having made public comment here in committee. So I'm done. I got 3 seconds left. So in conclusion, I appreciate your consideration. I appreciate your listening, and thank you very much.
Terry Kaufman Macias, City Attorney's Office. Just to clarify, this is just the CEQA appeal. The parcel map appeal was heard at the East LA Area Planning Commission, and it's not further appealable. It's only tentative maps that get the additional level of appeal to council. So what's before you is the CEQA appeal.
Okay, thank you. For the applicant, I have 4 cards here who have identified themselves as the applicant or representative. So whoever wants to take the 5 minutes, Danny Maelka, Noah Ornstein, Laurie Harris, and Ryan Liederman.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Noah Ornstein on behalf of the applicant. First, I'd like to thank the honorable members of the council for hearing this appeal and for working on the project. I'd also like to thank project staff. We've worked really closely with them throughout the submittal and approval process. I would like to thank Council District 13 for their work on the project and their support at the administrative agency hearing, as well as in support of the project at the Area Planning Commission hearing as well. And we would also like to thank many members of our team that have worked on the project that are here today. Danny and Ryan and Wade and Tal and Lori and a bunch of folks that have worked really hard to design what we think is a great and really innovative project. It is a 4-home small lot subdivision that has requested no variances or modifications from any planning or building codes whatsoever. The project appellant is an investor who owns an apartment building next door, which has the same density, the same general massing, and the same architectural style as our proposed project. There is no mere whiff or semblance of environmental consideration to this CEQA appeal. It is based on market factors and few things greater than that. There were a couple of issues raised in the appellant's argument, which I'd like to address briefly, and then submit the rest of the time to the council. As Ms. Kaufman-Macias noted, this is not a hearing for the parcel map appeal. That appeal has already been filed and was unanimously rejected by the Area Planning Commission. The appellant has insinuated that this approval was the result of special interests or bait and switch or a lack of identifiable information on the project. That is simply not the case. Full architectural plans, project elevations, and extensive material has been submitted with the original file and can be viewed at anyone's desire at any time and is part of the public record. With regards to some of the other CEQA issues and the specific claims that have been made, we have submitted a response to the clerk that addresses every claim that has been represented by the appellant. I believe it is part of the record, and if the members of the council would like to reflect further on the issues raised by the appellant, they may do so. We urge the council to adopt the motion of planning staff, as well as the administrative agency, as well as all the agencies that have reviewed this project previously, as well as the determination of the Area Planning Commission, and approve the project as submitted. And if there are any specific inquiries or any other questions, I'm happy to address them, or members of our team can address them further. But I believe staff has done a very good job of briefing the council on the project. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys.
Danny Maelka, Laurie Harris, you. Welcome.
Thank you.
1 minute, sir.
Thank you. My name is Danny Mihalka, and as a local real estate professional in the area, this is a fabulous project that's completely consistent with the neighborhood. It'll bring absolutely amazing housing to the area, which is much needed, and it's just a great project that it's something to be proud of by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Harris, Ryan Lederman.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I just wanted to speak on behalf of this project and to note that this is a modular development, which means that these homes are going to be built off-site, reducing dramatically the impact of construction on the neighborhood, the impact of construction on the streets, and the amount of time needed for construction, as well as tremendously reducing the waste from the construction process. The homes will have the highest energy and efficiency rating available by the National Association of Home Builders. And we're proud of putting this project into this neighborhood. We think it fits really well with the neighborhood, with the character of the neighborhood, and we urge you to allow the project to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ryan Lederman.
Good afternoon, council members. Ryan Lederman. I just want to say that the appellant hasn't raised any fair argument of any new significant impact, and there's adequacy of the existing environmental documentation, and so therefore I urge you respectfully to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Clayton Prescott, Alan Hopkins.
Good afternoon, Plum Committee. First, I would like to thank you all for your attention and allowing me to participate in this very important forum. I work for the Quintero Project as a permitting consultant. My company, Burnham Nationwide, has been hired by the project team to provide expediting services. Burnham Nationwide has 25 years of national permitting experience working on virtually every type of project imaginable. It is in our opinion that Mr. Ornstein's project is not only completely compliant with all local codes, legislations, and regulations, it is also designed with the community's best intentions in mind. My personal feeling is that this is an innovative project that can bring much-needed development in single-family housing, not only to the direct community, but if scaled up to the larger Los Angeles area. As the vacant land becomes more obsolete, I can only hope for smaller future developments that are as eco-friendly and aesthetically pleasing. It is minimally impactful on the neighborhood, and I hope it will become the new trend. It is worth mentioning that this project is a new standard in quality for prefabricated, state-approved housing. This type of construction is designed to help alleviate the city of Los Angeles' hardships with plan check, permitting, and approval processes. Thank you for your time.
Alan Hopkins, John Stitch. Stick or Stitch?
Hi, I'm John Stitch. I've been I'm a concrete contractor, and I've been in the industry for 32 years, and I'm here in support of the project and support everything that the appellant has put forward, and to also shore up the fact that the person complaining, Richard Sherman, is bona fidely crazy, trespassing on the project, walking through the rubble of the concrete, rebar, splintered wood, threatening to pull an operator out of the machine and beat the shit out of him is just taking your actions a little bit too far for a man that's just trying to do his job. Thank you.
Thank you. John? Not here. Okay. Jennifer Daines or Dines left. Wade Graham, George Abrams.
Hi there. I'm a landscape designer on the project. I'm also a neighbor. I live 3 blocks away on Portia Street. I'm a little ambivalent about the small lot ordinance, particularly when it's not small lots, when you see entire city blocks getting converted into canyons. But this project is actually on a small lot. It actually seems exactly what the city council had in mind with the ordinance. Seems not problematic to me at all. It's actually small for the character of the neighborhood. This is a half block from Sunset, Quintero Street. It's really diverse. There are big apartment buildings from the 20s to the 90s. This is actually feels lightweight and relatively relatively small for the neighborhood. It seems exactly what they had in mind when they passed the small lot ordinance. I also want to point out that it seems the height of chutzpah, if not hypocrisy, to be complaining when the building directly behind it is exactly the same massing, size, and it blocked its neighbor's view even worse. Just to point that out. So, thank you.
George Abrams, Herman.
Yeah, I'm going to read Jennifer's statement into the record. Okay, we complained to the city planning and city attorney about the lead and asbestos at the site while they were actively demolishing on May 25th, 2016. Nobody did a thing. The house that stood at the site was completely demolished and hauled away. On June 13th, a hazmat crew dressed in white protective suits, outfitted with breathers and covered from head to toe, picked through the last bits of rubble to desperately find something to wrap up and haul away 3 weeks after the fact. This is a violation of the secret process and the conditions of approval of the project. This is a widespread problem throughout the city which needs to be addressed. LADBS has no staff to monitor lead and asbestos abatement compliance, and yet is required a part of the project condition compliance. How can the city require project conditions be satisfied when there's no city agency or representative tasked with monitoring or receiving complaints when compliance violations occur?
Herman.
I totally 118% agree with Mr. Abrams' point of view. I object to this hearing for today. I believe there should be a whole lot more transparency when it comes to the zoning change, the density, and the whole idea of, you heard it? Two sides to every story, kind of like David versus Goliath. And in this circumstance, Goliath loses. So in the future of public business, let us have transparency and openness in all means of public interest. Thank you, Mr. Abram, for your comments. Men and women, thank you for being here this late in the evening. You're welcome to come to Hollenbach for the LAPD Police Commission tonight. Don't shoot, don't shoot.
Thank you. That ends our public comment. Any questions or comments on this? Okay, staff, can you come up again, please? So this is an appeal based on the environmental clearance. Under your view, does it comply with all the requirements of the CEQA?
Yes, the staff, when they prepared the M&D, they adequately addressed all the issues.
Okay, and this doesn't raise to the level on the EIR, correct? This is
no, it does not. It's simply a small lot subdivision replacing an existing improved site with a density that's consistent with the zoning.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll move that we deny the appeal and sustain the determination of the East LA APC in adopting the MND for the purpose of a small lot division. Any objections? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you very much. Next item.
Public comment, Councilman.
Public comment. Ruth Sarnoff.
Ruth Sarnoff. I wanted to bring to your attention the more recent issues of downtown news that once again glorify and push forward the agenda of gentrification of downtown Los Angeles and the Los Angeles area. I will just put it in your hands. I have additional copies. And I want to say that I think that there is an opportunity here with the county trying to get state approval for the taxation of the wealthy around meeting some of the needs of the homeless. All of the polling has shown that that would pass if it were on the ballot. And I don't know why the city is not taking the same path. Thank you.
Thank you. Herman?
Good evening. As a reminder to this commission, Plum, it would be polite and in best interest of the public if our elected officials would stick around for general public comment out of courtesy. As you see, Mitch Englander couldn't face the Zozo, the Trooper. Mr. B and I rule City Hall today because we got kicked out of a public safety meeting by the douchebag Mitch Englander, the dwarf who fell in fifth
Mr.
place
Herman,
for County Board
you are
Supervisor.
here to speak, hold this time. You are here to speak on items pertaining to planning and land use. If you're going to speak on general comments, go to the council meeting for that. Here it has to do with issues pertaining to planning and land use. Thank you. You could continue as time, please.
So when it comes to the issues of homelessness and the prosperity of humanity to exist, coexist without segregation, discrimination, and have some assholes stop us from participating in public meetings, I say to you, what the fuck is America coming to you? Trump, 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 Trump. That's right, as Wayne Spindler said, Trump.
Thank
Trump,
you.
Trump.
That concludes this meeting.